Episode 26, Expat Dads, Switzerland. Peter, our first international guest, and turns out he's your friend.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence of sorts. We've been planning this for a while, and I guess this is one of the upsides of the quarantine, literally for us, right?
Completely.
Yeah, so we've managed to get a very old friend of mine, Rahul Dhonde, and for those of you who heard our previous episode, I'm just going to kind of end up repeating myself, but Rahul and I know each other since we were 8 years old. I'm not going to say more to give away my age or anything, but but yeah, it's been like a great journey of friendship because when we first knew each other, all we cared about was playing football and our studies and stuff like that. Then moved into, our various fields, colleges. We were apart in 2 different countries then, but it's one of those things about the internet, right? That you manage to stay in touch.
Right.
And then, Rahul got married first. So I knew his wife for a while since they dated. And then, of course, he got introduced to Karen once we started dating. And then now both of us are dads. And it's just been crazy how, when I look back at all these years, just how seamless it's been, the journey, because, we know each other for so long. How like you have those friends that you can just pick up the conversation no matter when. Rahul is one of those kind of guys for me. Like we won't speak for days or even months at time, but it just picks up normally the conversation from when we last spoke.
I remember when I first met Rahul and we just got talking. I think I was very intrigued to know that how did he end up in Switzerland? And he said, when I was a kid, my father kept saying, "What are you doing inside the house? Just go out and do something. Go out." So I just decided to move out like permanently and shifted to Switzerland. And I found that so funny the way he said it. So yeah, I think let's just have a chat with Rahul, and he's fun. He's a fun guy.
Hi Rahul, welcome to Pops on a Pod. I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this episode together.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We've been talking about it for a while. I'm happy that it's worked out.
Yes, I know Peter has been telling me that let's try and do this whole international summit, and obviously the country had to be Switzerland. So we're like, works perfectly for all of us.
Yeah. No, I'm happy. Like I said, you guys are doing something that's quite unique. So I'm happy to have a small contribution to it.
Thank you.
So, Rahul, the last couple of months, we've been exchanging notes as to what's happening with this whole lockdown, COVID pandemic all over the world. How have things been with you and Prachi? How have you guys been managing working from home, being parents from home, and now like full-time parents almost, right?
Yeah, it's a different experience. It's a different experience, but I think also it's like very dependent on what kind of lockdown you had, right? So for here in Switzerland, at the most severe, the only thing that was really closed down were general stores, so you couldn't go outside and buy a football. They had closed like the public sports centers, so you couldn't have access to the public gyms and stuff. And you had no access to the playground part of parks, so you couldn't use the slide and the swing. But besides that, everything was kind of open. So we used to go out, I think, almost every day or every alternate day with Param to the parks just to get him to burn off that energy for an hour, 2 hours every evening, which is absolutely essential because if he doesn't get tired, then he doesn't sleep. And if he doesn't sleep, we don't sleep. And, it's a vicious cycle. So for us, it's not been, in terms of the lockdown, it's not been that hard. Grocery stores were always open. Yes, there were lines, but nothing like you had to wait in line for like 6 hours, nothing like that. Just maybe 40 minutes at the most that you had to wait in line. Stuff was generally available. It was challenging, of course, to manage work and Param because you come to know how much of attention they actually need.
Yeah.
Especially the age that he's in. And then you leave this with a newfound respect for the people working at the nursery. I don't know how they manage it and how much of patience they have, because like it's hard to to be all the time playing and all the time interacting and all the time facilitating. It's quite difficult, and we're also quite strict about not giving him access to any screens. So some people it was easier because you just like give them the iPad and then they're on their own for an hour and a half, and time flies like that. For us, it was like, okay, every hour, okay, what do we play with you? And then he loses patience very quickly, so you're moving to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and then you find that you've done 10 activities and it's like only 15 minutes. So you're like, wow, time really slows down. I mean, yeah, so in that sense, it took a little bit of time to get used to that. But then you get used to it, and then Prachi and I were both working. So we managed to somehow alternate, like when she had to take a call, I was with him, and I had to do a call, she was with him. And we kind of integrated that. I think our respective workplaces were a little respectful of that as well. So it worked out. I mean, it wasn't as intense as the stories I'm hearing out of Bombay. That's
Yeah, I mean, like Nadir and I both had a big smile on our faces when you talked about being able to take your son out to the park, because that's something both of us and people who've been listening to the podcast, both of us have been talking about that. It's really tough, right? And trying to keep your son active, your daughter active, running around up in the house, and let's not even get into the sleep cycle, how those have gone for toss.
We've also been very particular about the whole screen time, but honestly, we had to sort of be very lax on that. There was nothing we can do because both, my wife and I are in a very essential kind of a sector, right? So I look into digital marketing, my wife looks into banking, and both of them are extremely crucial because digital is going up and banking will never stop. So I completely understand when you were saying that you have to keep your child active. So my day starts with showing her what to write and what to draw, and then suddenly you realize it's only been 15 minutes, and that's all that she's going to write and draw. And then after that, it's like, okay, iPad, okay, phone, okay, laptop, and like, what do you do, right? She's only 4 years old. She can't read. I wish she could read because she enjoys books, but she can't. So at some point, we just have to let go, and we're like, okay, forget it. Just give her the iPad. 1 hour, we'll try and quickly wrap the work. Grab the iPad, shut it, put it back, and then maybe we can look at it, again in the afternoon. So this lockdown has really taught us some very important lessons that, sometimes you just have to let go. You can't be that regimented and that planned. Especially for me, imagine me. Like I really am planned about certain things, but it's just all gone out the window, and it's just been really weird.
Yeah, I think we overstress it sometimes as parents. I think, after an hour or two, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. What does make a difference though is like if you're with like in my case Param all the time and you don't have like any peace of mind, then work is clawing at the back of your head. And that's more damaging because then you're just like somehow losing patience with everything around you. And I think that has a worse effect than an hour of iPad that you can plug in, finish your work, or like just do something yourself alone, and then play. So yeah, I mean, eventually, we have to be more relaxed. For us, also, the screen is somehow unavoidable when it comes to contacting family, right? I mean, the only way we do, like, Param can see his grandparents, cousins, etc., is when we do video calls.
Yeah.
And now, since we are unable to travel, and God knows when we'll be able to travel, or when my parents will be able to come, or Prachi's parents will be able to come, I think just to maintain that family relationship, you need to have a video call every day or every couple of days. So at some level, the screen is anyways there. So it's like you might as well run with it.
Yeah. But, we can go on and on in this. I mean, Nadir and I have done like 2 months worth of episodes talking about all these various aspects. But, let's just step back a few years, Rahul, because, I mean, we've known each other since we were 8, right? And we've seen each other go through various milestones in our life. But, for those listening, so what was it like the whole decision to become parents? Because both Nadir and I have talked on the podcast how there's like a certain point where there's a focused effort towards that. How is it for you and Prachi? And especially, considering both of y'all live in Switzerland, which is a country both of y'all didn't grow up in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because we were we had, I think, very different opinions about. We both knew that we wanted to have kids, so that was the first that was the first real agreement that we had to come to. Prachi was a little hesitant in the first couple of years, but then she reached a point where she said, okay, now I'm ready to try. And we had thought about it, and of course we were both going to be here in Switzerland. We knew that was going to happen, and that our child would be born here. So that was kind of known. Besides that, I always wanted to have children earlier. She wanted it later once she had some sort of a settled career, some stability in her career. So when she was ready, we started this period which it happened was a little surprising to us. No complaints, but it was faster than we expected. I think that just has to do with Indians being very fertile.
But it's funny you're saying this because both Nadir and I talked, and we even got our wives on the episode, and it's just one of those things, right? Like, you spend so much time stressing, and there's not only your immediate family, but after you've been married a few years, you've got additional people asking you when is the good news coming and stuff like that. And that just kind of weighs on you, right? So there's a whole built up thing. And then again, it's your friend circle. So you'll see, or you'll always hear of people who've had a tough time. So you expect that, okay, maybe it'll be us, maybe. And then when, it's kind of seamless or a lot easier, it takes you by a surprise. So I completely agree when you say that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was more because my parents were hedging all the time, asking questions. Prachi's parents were quite relaxed in that sense. But beyond the point, I think both sides of parents just kind of gave up on it, and they're like, okay, they'll take their own decision. There's no point in doing this because they're not going to listen to us anyway. So.
Now with the current situation that we are in, I was having a conversation that day with someone. I think it was Peter, or I don't remember who, but we were just thinking that with this whole COVID process, right? I mean, you guys were in a completely different country. You'll have to go through so much, thinking and planning or whatnot. But today, married couple who intend to have children, right, will really think about this, considering what they've seen in today's day and age, and where we are and what we are doing. So, back then, did you ever think of, that, okay, what, now that we are planning to have a child, like, we have to stick to this. This is what we want to do. This is what we have to do, come what may. Did those thoughts ever occur to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you decide, I don't know, I don't think we thought that much. It was more like, okay, we'll have the kid, and, we're good enough financially to be able to sustain it. Although at that time, I must say, I didn't pay very much attention to how expensive and how complicated childcare can get here. And then, jo bhi hai, dekha jayega kind of thing. I mean, I think it was more played into to Prachi's thinking because she wanted some level of stability before thinking about it and getting into it. From me, I was always like, you adapt, you adjust, you'll manage, you'll make do. But yeah, now I can totally understand that people are more hesitant, more slow. Also because you just don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't know how my job's going to be affected. What's the stability going to be like? It's totally unknown. And every country is different, and every country is reacting differently. Every country is affected differently. I mean, I have friends that are working abroad who've been told, like, you have to take like a 30% pay cut for the next couple of months. And after 4 months, we don't even guarantee that you're going to have a job. Now, when you're and if they don't have a job, they can't stay abroad. They have to come back to India. It's not like they have a job waiting for them in India. So obviously now it's going to be a wholly different set of concerns, and people, I think, will be, will wait it out. Those that don't have access to like a vast pool of resources, which is most of us, anyway.
But precisely, I mean, the struggle is extremely real right now. Because we see it happening to everyone. So clearly it's country agnostic at this point in time. Whether you're sitting in India, whether you're sitting in Switzerland, it's very real what's kind of happening to everyone. Yeah. And when you add the added pressure of parenting on top of that, especially when you have younger children, I think it just gets much more pronounced, the kind of problems that we face.
Yeah, I fully agree. I just think that there's an additional layer of complexity when you're an expat because you have to move back. Like,
correct.
and there's nothing there. Like, you guys are effectively kind of settled in Bombay, but for someone that's been abroad, and I have friends that have been abroad for like 12, 15 years, I haven't been abroad for that long yet. For them to like, okay, when we move back, like, where do we go? What do we do? Like, we haven't, it's completely, and that's like an additional layer of stress. So, complicated times in so many different ways.
But coming back to a point that you made earlier about expenses, right? What was it like, if I may ask, in terms of dealing with doctors and stuff like that in Switzerland? What has your experience been like?
But I think that's a very good question. But the thing, I mean, there's Switzerland and then there's Geneva, right? Geneva is fairly international, unlike the rest of Switzerland.
At this point, I want you to just take a second and tell us the difference between Geneva and Switzerland, for those of you who aren't, or those listening who aren't privy to that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying. So Geneva is very international. We have the largest number of international organizations in the world per square foot. And the Europe headquarters of the UN are here. You've got like diplomats coming in and out. Also it's one of the preferred destinations for both Arabs and Russians, for reasons I'd rather not get into now. So you have it's the whole culture in Geneva is kind of different from the culture that you have in other places of Switzerland. So as an expat, finding support in a language that you're comfortable with is easier here than it would be elsewhere. So of course we speak English, and we like when you're thinking about childcare and pregnancy and everything, the gynecologist, pediatrician, etc. You obviously want someone who can understand you fully and that you can understand fully. Finding that in Geneva is easier than in other places, right? Because English is not an official language in Switzerland at all. So you have to look, but finding that in Geneva is not hard. We did find, all of our doctors are English speaking. Obviously, the pediatrician was English speaking, the hospital staff, nurses, etc. You take it for granted. Of course, in India, I think you take it for granted. You assume that everyone understands you. It's not always the case when you move abroad. So that is definitely something that I would encourage people to keep in mind. Those that are not in Anglophone countries. Again, your pediatrician may speak, your gynecologist may well speak English and speak well, but then if you go to a public hospital and you have to interact with a nurse or a midwife who doesn't understand you, then you have a problem. For us, it was easy because we managed to, again, like I said, Geneva is more international, so everyone kind of speaks English and there's no stress. It was a little complicated. You don't have all of the choices. It's okay. I mean, it's not that hard. You have to think it out, though.
Okay. So, at this point, of course, one of the things for those listening in India know is that in Western countries, and especially places like Switzerland, it is a norm to kind of find out the sex of the child, right, before birth. Again, for multiple various reasons. India, culturally and by law, you're not allowed to find out the sex of the child. Was there something that, you and Prachi had decided when she was pregnant that you all were going to find out, you all weren't going to find out the sex of the child?
We never had a conversation about it, but I think both of us kind of agreed that we would never, without having said so, we both never approached the issue of ever having to find out either. So we were quite happy not knowing. A lot of these decisions, I think one of the reasons is, we want to decorate the nursery and we don't know if it's going to be pink or blue and shit. And Prachi and I are just not those kind of people. So we were like, we will get a nursery and we're color indifferent. Like the baby doesn't care, can't even recognize colors, and it doesn't really make a difference to us. So we never really thought of it. Of course, we could have done it if we wanted to. And in Switzerland, the culture is different here. So here the parents find out and don't tell the family and friends. And the family and friends ask like leading questions all through the pregnancy to kind of try to identify what the sex of the child is. So they're like always, oh yeah, I went to the store and I picked up this really nice red t-shirt with a card and I'll give it to your baby once, he's born. And then they'll wish for the reaction. Is the reaction like, oh no, I can't wear it. And, So that way, they have all of these games that they play. For us, it was totally lost. We never really.
So, but were your friends then kind of like, was there like?
Well, they were convinced that we knew and that we were playing the game.
Oh wow! Okay.
So yeah, we got a lot of these questions from my colleagues at work and general friends like, no, Avishwa, how can you not know? And they're like, we genuinely do not know. Like, I think also one of the first questions, because when Param was born, that Prachi had while she was in the operating room. So Param was born, and then they did all of the cleaning, and then they wrapped him up. And then she's like, but wait, is it a boy or a girl? Because they had told her, but she was like so engrossed in the moment, right? It was like completely, she just like blanked out at that point, I think. So, yeah.
But the choice of not finding out, was it something that you always wanted to kind of keep it as a surprise element, or you were like, "Nahi yaar, India mein nahi hota hai, so we don't want to do it,"
Yeah, I think it was more a surprise element. We didn't really think about whether we would have done it were we in India. I mean, I don't think we would have found out. We would have found out anyway. We're like, whatever, as long as the kid is healthy, what else do you need? I mean, we had our own preferences, of course. I always wanted a boy, and Prachi always wanted a girl. But that's something else.
Okay.
So, Rahul, in Indian culture, right, one of the things is that the wife or the mother goes to her mother's place to give birth, right? The first thing, that's one of those things. Was that something you all ever considered? Was that something you all wanted to do? Or because, it was Switzerland and your son had to, or your child had to be born there, and for legal purposes, you had to register him and stuff? Was that something that was at play?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, but then I think both of us agreed very quickly on that as well. I mean, if she had to move back to India, it would be very hard for me to be a part of everything, and both of us wanted me to be a part of everything, so that was kind of put off the table very quickly. There's a cultural difference here because, in Prachi's community, the first child is not born at her mother's house, but is born in my house, let's say.
Wow.
So yeah, that's quite harsh. In my community, it's exactly what you just said. The first child is born at the mother's house, the mother of the mother to be. But we had Prachi's mom that came, mom and dad, in fact, both of them that came in about 2 months before, a month and a half before she was due to deliver, and that her mom stayed a month after. So we try to have that kind of be replicated as much as of India at home as we could, both because Prachi is very traditional in certain respects, and so is her mother. So there was like 2 months before, or a month and a half before, there were all kinds of, I don't know what was happening in the kitchen, like foods and smells and things, and we tried to replicate the Indian scenario as much as we could.
So Rahul, you mentioned that your in-laws were also there. So I guess you had a little bit of relief, because then I'm sure it must be very tough, firstly being in a new country, and then just you and your wife and this third member coming in. So for you, was it like, oh, thank God they're here, now I can hang back? Or was it like, okay, no, they're in a new country, I have to help them in whatever way I can? Like, did you play the perfect son-in-law host, or did you like, hey, I'm gonna hang back a little,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, her parents fortunately had been to Switzerland before. So they were not complete. It wasn't like their first time here. So they knew what to expect, and I kind of knew how they were, or they would be when they were here. So we were kind of mutually prepared. I had to change a couple of things because I knew that this would be like a really long time. So I got, for instance, like Indian TV channel subscription and stuff. I mean, here, honestly, we don't watch the TV much, but I had to get like Indian TV channels. So like her dad would be able to watch his news, and thank God really for the IPL, because that kept him busy for several many hours without getting really bored and without missing India. And that was really the perfect time. I tried to stay away as much as I could, also because I didn't understand half the things that were going on. And honestly, I don't think that Prachi really understood much. Her mom kind of took over the kitchen and was, doing her thing, and it was happy. It was her space and her contribution, and it helped keep things normal, because it's a long. I mean, it's not like we stay in the largest of apartments, and when you're in India, you go out, you socialize, you have so many activities that you do. Here, it's like everyone is kind of, your main activity is when you're together all the time at home. So everyone needs to find their little niche to kind of work in, and then things move more smoothly. So it wasn't. I think it was fairly smooth. Everyone understood, and once the kid was born, then everyone's kind of oriented around Prachi and the baby and the health and everything. So it kind of it's a good time. More than 2 months before, we would have gone nuts. Just when you were reaching that stage of everyone getting on everyone's nerves, baby happened, and perfect.
So that was like a great segue into like, okay, just when I'm about to go absolutely batshit, something great happens and distraction and diversion has happened.
Totally. And then you're like forgotten. It's like all, like my daughter, my grandson, that's it. And who are you? Oh, really? You live here? Fine. Okay, if you must, but...
So you're technically the service provider then.
Totally. I'm just connecting the dots. That's all. But yeah.
But Rahul, you must have heard our pregnancy stories, right? Like what happened when our respective wives were pregnant, and Peter and his whole situation of complete confusion. Wait, hang on. I was supposed to be in, but I thought you said no. And then my whole deal of eating a chicken roll when my wife's delivering and everything. So did you have any such incidents, or did you come across something that you would like to share?
At the time of the delivery, not really. It was very long. Prachi wasn't dilating quickly, and then it became a little bit of a problem. What happened was that, by then we had trained her parents, I say, as if you can ever train parents, wishful thinking. But we had showed her parents the way to get from home to the hospital and things. So we went into the hospital, and the doctor said, you're not going back. You're going to have the baby and go back. We were there. Her parents were here. So we were like, okay, how do we organize this? So we got them to come, but then there was no way of communicating with them. So we knew that they had reached, but then, you're in the pre-operation theater thing. You don't have access to your phone and stuff. And it took a long time. So the hospital was nice enough. They gave them, coffee and tea and kept them happy and said, everything is okay. It's just that, you just can't communicate. So by the time we saw them, it was fairly late, like nearly 11 o'clock or so at night, and they've been just waiting in the waiting room for 3 or 4 hours. So that was as far as the interaction with the parents was. And between the two of us, eventually Prachi had like an emergency C-section. So I was in the room with her. Giving all of the support I could. So nothing funny, but it's just that, it really, you can't plan these things. It just happens.
True.
You just do the best what you can, and just have faith that everything goes off well. And that's for everyone. I think her parents were a lot cooler. If my parents were there, they would have raised hell. They would have gone and told the hospital staff, what nonsense, we've not heard from our kids. Like, have you kidnapped them? Where's my grandson? What are you doing? We want video recording. What have you? Her parents were kind of calm, and they said, the doctors will take care, and their adults will manage themselves. So, yeah.
So that's good. So then everything kind of went off smoothly. But then I think the real challenge for you guys would have probably started after your in-laws left the country, because now it's just you, right? So then that's nice little bubble that you all were in, and suddenly goes pop, and you're like, okay, back to 3. How do we deal with it? So there's so many things you guys must have had to plan, right? Since it's just 3 of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 2 instances when you the bottom of your stomach falls out. The first is like when you have to leave the hospital. Because, when you're in the hospital, you were like, baby's crying, call the midwife. Okay, something's happening. There's some expert there to control it. And then they're like, okay, now bye, go home. And I'm like, holy shit. Now there's like no one that can call and that can just come and handle, So that was the first time that it happened. And the second time is, of course, when her parents left. But her parents being here was the biggest advantage ever. There's like so many things that you just don't know, or you're also kind of overwhelmed that you just can't manage. Her parents being here was a huge benefit. Totally. It was a little challenging too. But on the whole, without them, I don't think we would have been able to sustain. Also, mentally it helps for the new mother to have her mother in the same environment.
So then you had the in-laws to help out for a couple of months after the birth, but then what happened in terms of did you guys try looking for help in terms of nannies or I don't know, like daycare maybe? I mean, it's too young for a daycare situation, but then what about additional help?
Yeah. I mean, what happened was that Prachi got a lot of flexibility from her office, so she took a really long maternity leave, and then she was in India actually for 4 months.
Nice.
So we had Param with us only for, as in just the 3 of us, for about a month and a half after her mother left. And then she moved to India for 4 months, and we didn't really think about the nanny and things at that time, which we should have. The other thing is, Geneva is a little strange in the sense that daycare is not the easiest to get into. It's quite expensive. So people won't believe it, but it's true. Like the minute you come to know that you're going to have a baby, you need to make an application for daycare. Like I waited for like a couple of days to make a daycare application after we got to know that Prachi was pregnant, and all of my friends that had kids were like, hey, you're too late. You're not going to get daycare now. Like 3 days is like way too much. You should have had like everything ready when you were thinking of conceiving already, and then just to put the date in and send the form as soon as you know that you're through. I was like, okay, that's not what I'm used to. And then because the slots are fairly limited, and it's it's hard to get into, and then it's very much on a first come first serve basis. Right. So we did get daycare in, like, Param was born in April. We got daycare from August. We were one of the lucky ones. There are people that have waited for 1.5 years, 2 years, not gotten daycare.
Wow.
We were one of the lucky ones. We got it in August. But then we were like, we can't take it in August because Prachi is not going to be here. She's going to be in India for 4 months.
Right.
So then we were like, we don't want to lose the spot. Can we reserve our spot and we'll come back? She was going to come back in Jan. So can we take it up in Jan? And they said, no, you can't do it. And, eventually we had to give it up and make a fresh application. And then that was a different problem because, Prachi would come back in January. There was no daycare spot. How do you interview a nanny when you don't have the baby? I can't interview a nanny. Like, I was in Geneva. Like, what am I going to ask her? She's like, okay, fine. What you have to see is how I can take care of the baby. Where's the baby? And like, a baby is video call away. Let's see how you do it. It makes no sense. So that put a lot of pressure in those months of December and January. Like, okay, we had to find a nanny very quickly because we didn't have daycare. How do you find one? So that was a little stressful. We did find a nanny who we were happy with, who was close by, very good. But then, like, we got a message from her from like one night to the next saying, oh, I cannot work for you from tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And Prachi and I were like, wait, what happened? So this is like a Sunday night. She says, I can't come from Monday. And we're like, Prachi is going to office in like 4 days, like getting back to work. I'm already back at work. What are we going to do with this in the winter and what have you? So, all of this stuff you can't prepare for. So then finally we had to like interview. And like anywhere else in the world, nothing helps better than word of mouth. So eventually we landed on a nanny that we were happy with, who is really, really fond and takes care of the kid. Is Spanish though. So that's a separate challenge. But we're with her now for over a year and things are going well. That's what.
So let me get this. Good. So let me get this straight. Indian kid growing up in Switzerland with a Spanish nanny. So how many languages does your son speak at this point?
He is exposed to many. So I speak to him largely in English, also in Marathi. Prachi speaks to him largely in Gujarati, also in English. Wow. The nanny speaks to him in Spanish because that's her language and her English is atrocious. So rather than him picking up like bad English where if your Spanish is good, it's okay, speak to him in Spanish. And now he goes to the daycare for 3 days a week and he's with the nanny for 2 days. So the 3 days a week that he's in the crash, he has French. So that's 5 languages already. which you know, we told the pediatrician, and she was like, that's interesting, maybe one too many. So like, okay, so we've asked the nanny to drop the Spanish to the extent she can, and speak to him in Spanish. It's anyways only 2 days a week, so hopefully his English that he picks up won't be too bad. But he also, like, now that he's speaking more and more, instead of like play, he says put. You know, these random kind of words that she's used to, that she's translating in her head from Spanish that she's into English, and then he's picking that up, and I'm like, no, please, like, pick up our English. You can't control it. I mean, the main thing though is, you know, all of these are kind of dressing. I think the important thing when you're looking for a nanny is that, you know, you're comfortable with her and she's comfortable with the child, and the child has to be comfortable with her, and that's very clearly the case here. She's received a stamp of approval from both sets of grandmothers, which is like the
gold standard,
most difficult thing. Yeah. So we'll keep her and work with the language as we can.
And I'm glad to hear everything that you said, because Nadir and I have not done a episode on nannies or extra helpers yet, but I'm sure we're going to refer back to your experience, because both Nadir and I had completely contrasting experiences, and definitely one worthy of an episode of its own.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different challenge. Yeah. I mean, look, daycare here, for instance, it's different for you guys there, but every country has its own uniqueness. Like, we have him only for 3 days. That's not entirely out of choice. We made an application over 9 months ago to move him to daycare full time. No spots free.
Imagine if we had that kind of daycare culture in India. I don't think the lines would ever end.
Yeah.
I think that's a separate business opportunity, which is like very untapped.
Yeah,
I think everyone is kind of getting into that right now, because people have also started understanding the dynamics of their own family, right? So people are not going crazy having 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, right? Like, it's like 1 kid and that's it. Focus everything on that one child. So you want to give the best to that child, right? So if you have to pay a couple more rupees or dollars or whatever additionally, you'll do it because it's for the betterment of the child. If you have 2, 3, they're like, forget it, just put him wherever, you know, figure it out.
Yeah.
But so, you know, at this point you're talking about daycare. So considering now Nadir's daughter is 4, my son's 3, Param turns 3 again?
No, he's just 2. He turned 2 at the end of April.
Wow.
Just over 2.
Wow. Yeah. So wait, so now comes the important part, because if you focus so much on daycare and things, what's it like with schooling? I'm very curious to know.
So schooling
is you've already made the plan, right? You've already put in the form, you've already written it, sent it for application, you've done all of that, right?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, that's my cultural background. What have you? My parents have always been like, focus on schooling. Best education must never suffer, and you know, you have to have the best of whatever. So yeah, I've already paid some attention to it. So here, the by law mandatory schooling is from age 4. So Param is just on 2 now. So by law, he doesn't have to go into school until he's 4. Public education is completely free. Nice. I don't have to pay 1 cent, and it's very good. Unlike other places in Europe, the public education system here in Switzerland is superb. So it's not, and this is for all of the public schools, at least in Geneva. So, you know, it's not like the US where people are, I have to put my kid into this public school, so I need to change and buy a house here. So I fall in the catchment zone of that school. Correct. My sister did that, for instance. You know, they bought a house in a zone where they wanted to put their kids into that school, right? And then you pay the premium and whatever. So it's not the same. It's not like that here. All of the schools, wherever you are really good. The only drawback, and that's a drawback more for expats, is that the schools, at least in Geneva, run exclusively in French.
Oh, okay.
Medium of instruction is always going to be French. You can tag on to that like English language courses, but it's a tag on. Your medium of instruction is French. So then as an expat, you have to think about whether that's what ideally you want for your child or not. I mean, you know, if you're committed to stay in this country or in Geneva for a very long time, then and you're sure, then maybe it's fine. But of course, you know, as we've traveled, we moved from India to Switzerland. Tomorrow we may move elsewhere, and we are kind of more used to English, and I think English is now increasingly important. more than
Right.
French is a language of business and transactions. So the public school system, although very good, is not the best choice for us potentially, just because of the language thing.
Right.
So then you look at private schools. Private schools, of course, you have to pay for, and they're fairly expensive. IB is, and then you have multiple streams. So you have the IB stream, you have the Swedish stream, you have the German stream.
Do you have an Indian school there?
No, not enough Indian population here. I don't even think there's one. So the maximum density of Indians are in Zurich, and even there isn't one. So there is, I think the closest one to us is like the one that there is in Brussels. I think there's like a Delhi public school or something in Brussels. I don't know. Antwerp, dude, it's where all the designers are selling diamonds. So there's no Indian school. So we'll probably go for IB, and I've already visited, as Nadir was saying. I've already visited the schools. We did that just before the lockdown, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so the IB system starts from age 3.
Okay.
So arguably, Param could be into school like from next year.
Nice.
We haven't decided. Prachi is of a different view. She said, unless it's mandatory, I don't want to put him. Even if it's IB, we don't have to do it from age 3. So he has to be in school at 4. Whether it's IB, Swiss, or whatever. So we don't know whether we're going to do it next year or not. We'll see. But there are a couple of options here. It's just that it's an expensive proposition. It's not cheap, which is why also a lot of people will put their kids into public school, because it's like 0 to a lot.
Yeah, there's a big, so it's like two different ends of the spectrum. But I know for a fact now that we next time do a school episode, we have to get Rahul back on to share his experience.
Yeah.
I think I have to wait for at least 2 years.
Well, I am tempted to put him in next year, but no, it's tough. I mean, really, it's like nearly 25 to 30 grand. 25 to 30 grand just for like, they do nothing. Like, they go and they scratch their ass there. Like, I'm sorry.
All the teachers are going to send us hate mail after this.
Oh, we have like nap time, and we expose him to nature. I'm like, I expose him to nature. I don't like have to pay 5,000 francs to like expose him to nature, dude. I call it walking in the park.
Maybe their nature is like homegrown or something.
Yeah.
They use mineral water or something, like spring water from the mountains.
Seriously. It's hygienic nature.
Listen, Param will get to drink Voss bottled water in there, nothing else.
Seriously.
What is that other really expensive water?
Evian.
Evian, yes.
Evian.
All right.
Yeah. We are undecided on age 3, but age 4, I mean, we have to see. So the public schools here, the private schools here allow you to do a bilingual course. So it'll be English French. This is what we will probably do. So it's like 3 days English, 2 days French. Next week, 3 days French, 2 days English. Next week, 3 days English. So it's proper bilingual education. Your maths, your science, your social sciences, all of that is 2 languages.
Wow.
So at least from a planning standpoint, even if you all have to move to some other country within Europe, outside Europe, or I don't know, maybe just come back to India, which I presume will be tougher. But if you're within the borders of Europe, I think things will be much better for Param. But at least you've looked at it from a future standpoint. That
most definitely. Most definitely, and that's why also IB, because IB is also is like it translates boundaries quite easily, right? Otherwise, there's this adjustment phase, and maybe the child has to lose a year or something, or he's put into a class which is too hard, and then that has some psychological or other effects, behavioral issues and things. It's better to kind of commit to one system, and then that's across boundaries. Currently, that's IB. Although IB is, like I said, expensive, but then it's, as Nadir was saying, if you have only 1 or 2 kids, you want to do everything that you can do for them. You focus on them. If you have more, then it's a different,
Yeah, Rahul, you've given us a lot to talk about in a future episode, and hopefully it doesn't take 2 years, maybe before the end of the year. But thanks a lot. I mean, we're constantly in touch, so it's great. And I can't believe that, I feel really old, but now we know each other for almost more than 25 years, huh?
Yeah, seriously, it does make you feel old. Like, holy shit. I mean, I remember in school, like we were only thinking you basketball and me football. And from there, now we're thinking about kids in school. And I'm like, holy crap.
Not even kids in school. It's more like which board? Which board do you want to go for? You want to go for Ivy board or you want to go for the other board? It's specifics.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot for being a part and sharing your experience of being a parent on the episode. We'll definitely stay in touch. I would normally at this part put that anyone wants to reach out to you, but considering you're an arbitration lawyer, I hope no one wants to reach out to you or has reached that stage as yet.
I'm happy for anyone to reach out to me, and also thank you for having me on. I mean, you guys are doing something, like I said earlier, it's quite unique in this, at least in the Indian context. I think even in the broader global context, it's quite unique. So yeah, I'm happy to play a part. I think Pops have a really important role to play, and sometimes you're just kind of at sea. You don't know what the hell to do. So having conversations like this is useful because you hear stuff that other people are doing, something clicks, and then you're like, yeah.
Thanks so much, Rahul. Thank you so much for talking to us, and hopefully we'll meet you again. And when we have to discuss school and how
Sure.
So yeah, that was Rahul Dhonde. It was good to catch up, and I'm glad we could have a conversation like that about just being parents. And for me, it's always been interesting just to see how different it is for him living in Switzerland and all the various experiences that he's had to go through. So yeah, I hope our listeners also found it interesting.
No, absolutely. I completely agree because, the minute you hear Switzerland, right, you're only thinking, oh, wow, glamour and valleys and snow-capped mountains and cheese and chocolate and clocks and watches or whatever. But like he's a regular guy, he's working, he's earning his living, and he's just doing exactly the same things that we're doing. The only difference is he's on a different continent and we're on a different continent. And the struggle is real. I guess irrespective of where you are. So that was nice to hear. Obviously he's breathing cleaner air than we are, so that's one up for him. But yeah, dads are dads everywhere, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, that's all for this episode. We've been doing a lot over the last 25 episodes. Is there a topic you'd like us to discuss? Anything that you think would be relevant from not only a dad's perspective, but also from a parenting perspective? Hit us up on popsinapod@gmail.com.
Or you can follow us on Instagram. Just search for Pops in a Pod and follow our page. We have recently started our own page on Facebook as well. Again, no surprises. Just search for Pops in a Pod and like us on Facebook. And we'll also put up some interesting content apart from the episode links. So yeah, start liking us, start sharing, and feedback is also great. Anything to communicate with you guys. Thank you once again, and we shall see you next week.